A base building is being damaged. Your base is under attack.
Give me orders. On station. Something is moving out there. 6. As you order. As you command. On station.
As you order.
Enemies.
On station.
Over. Alright, so Derivar, go ahead and give the intro. Yeah, you're cutting out.
Give me 1 second. Yeah, welcome everyone to this week's podcast, and we'll get started right off the bat with Robert here. Starting off with the announcement for strategic resources.
Okay, so let me pull up some screenshots and give me just a moment. I'm going to share my screen in the channel. And then let me also put it live on the stream. Okay, and then you figure first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the pictures that I posted the other day in the announcements channel. So give me just one moment. Alright, so basically the idea is that we are implementing strategic resources in the avenue of ways to basically just kind of get ways of like resupplying your units active in the field while you're playing. They kind of give more reason to kind of get out and just like not try and just hide over here or hide over here, and then you have no real incentive to get out and push and build more outposts and build more bases. And then on top of that, because of their placement, they could like, if you build a small little outpost here or a small little base here, they could also serve as like basically a finite little like resupply point that you can capitalize on mid to late game, to even early game, as you're playing the game. So like you figure we're adding like gas stations, little hospitals, and like you figure one thing that's missing on the picture that we showed on the announcements was there's no police stations and there's no gun stores. And the biggest thing was that you think like that's like a huge thing in like the zombie like culture is that there's always like a gun store. There's always like some kind of like police station that gets overran or some other cool stuff like that. And that will kind of segue into what we want to do in the future with some of the police factions and the anarchists. So you figure all of this is kind of like building towards eventually getting back to that point when we get around to the campaign for doing the police and doing the anarchists. Because you figure, I didn't touch upon this too much on the last poll, but you figure, I mean, there's a huge demographic of people that want to see our resources pushed back onto the police and the anarchists. So at this point, like you figure, we're going to have to like figure that out. Like regardless, we're going to have to figure it out before we do the campaign. So then in turn, that will trickle into the pandemic mode because they have to be done regardless for the campaign to do the story. So it comes down to like, in a way, we're also giving those larger factions areas to basically build around, take dominance over, to essentially work with the dynamic civilian groups, and to essentially give you some kind of challenge outside of just fighting Chelsea and her infected. So you could see like these little like satellite arrays or little like I guess like yeah, it is a satellite array, which is like here in the editor is essentially you'll take control of this air control tower, and by taking control of it, you'll be able to select that and be able to bring in the Abrams, the MLRS, the Apache, and the oh hurry up, brain fart, and the there's another one that I'm missing. The Abrams, the Bradley, the Apache, and the MRS. Those four, sorry. And that's the general direction that we're going into. Basically, the super weapons is that you have to take control of this airfield, which was recently retrofitted to support the C5 Galaxy. So that way, it could come on and land here, and then offload your units in this area, and then be taxied to come back around, and then take off, and then come back in 30 seconds later. Is the idea? Because like you figure that like that timer that we have for the normal infantry will be integrated into the C5 Galaxy for them bringing in the heavier units. Um, so essentially, that's something that it's going to be like we've done some level edits. Like there's going to be some more level edits. We're going to add like in the book and the story. There's like a police station in this area. So we're going to be adding the police station that like Pierce operates out of in the book. You're going to see that show up in this area, in this little province by this little like playground area. So that's another change that you're going to see happening. I mean, you can see it in this build where we've started to like rebrand certain structures and add like a clinic sign. So if you see that, you can go over there, you can capture that. And then now you can get passive healing for your units in that area until the resources in that facility run out. There's a couple of other ones that are just like if I go to the key that I have, like I could go to like I have this gas station like freaking memorized. Oh yeah, here it is. So like this gas station will actually be operable. Well, you'll be able to actually like come over here. You'll be able to secure this gas station, and it will be able to provide you, I mean, a good amount of gas until its reservoirs run out. And then the idea is that long term, this will integrate into more complicated faction play for when it comes to like Pierce and Natalie, because we do have plans for them to have vehicles, but we're trying to like not bite off more than we can chew and just kind of push that to the later end of this year and focus on right now, like all the systems in play, polishing those and refining what's on the 1.3 roadmap in terms of like the circuit doctrinal stuff that's coming down the pipe in about a week or two, because we're about a week or two out, hopefully, as long as there's no other like issues that prop up, which I'll talk about briefly. For like the other part of the programming announcement is that you figure would be essentially just kind of going and auditing the CERC, auditing the CERC, the doctrines, cleaning them up, doing some rebalancing, like reworking a DNA scanner and stuff like that, which we'll get like next time we meet, we'll be able to. I'll have like a whole list, and we'll just kind of go into the whole nitty gritty, because that'll be in about a weekend. Well, yeah, 2 weeks. So you figure by then I'll have like a list that we'll be going over of like all the stuff that I've kind of earmarked, and then we'll open it up to discussion on that day. So then that way you guys can like throw your 2 cents in terms of like, oh, well, I feel like this is a bigger concern because of like these aspects of gameplay are useless or whatever. So you figure like that's something else that we're going to be doing going into like wrapping up experimental. Because right now, there was a fatal bug that was discovered in terms of how we program some of our units that we needed to basically address before we went any further. And then it was also done in the vein of basically making it easier so when we do get to like co-op and everything else, it's a lot easier to replicate and convert over the systems. So I'll show you guys an example just to kind of segue into that. Is that you can figure, we have all these little components right here, like we have a Cepheus buoyancy, but what I'm looking for is the character garrison system. So for people that aren't like that technically inclined, I'll explain it, and this is kind of what screwed us over, and this is why experimental has some issues with garrisoning with the LCACs, the LHA6, and the guard towers, which is why we were like, okay, no, this ain't gonna fly. We're not gonna put a band-aid on this. We're gonna rip the whole thing out, and we're just gonna do it correctly. Because if we don't do it now, we're gonna have to do it again in the future when we get the co-op anyway. Because nobody wants to work with this in terms of like we used it as a prototype like way of implementing the garrison. But we were still kind of learning the best practices because not everything on the engine is like perfectly documented. So you kind of have to learn by just failure almost. So when it came down to it, this is kind of like our component that's modular. So we can make any vehicle garrisonable now just by going to add, typing in garrison, what is it? Character garrison, and then configuring it, and then setting it all up here. And now it makes it to where, like, oh, if we're going to add a new garrison, we don't have to go into the C++, we don't have to go into the blueprints, we don't have to add in, like, all this really overly complicated logic and boilerplate code that you have to copy and paste from, like, 6 different classes, or like worrying about is the inheritance for like the base vehicle or the helicopter going to break it. No, we spent the time the last couple of days just tearing apart the entire garrison system and just rewriting it. So then that way, it's easier to work for co-op. It's easier to work for modders. So like you figure if someone were to go and make like God forbid, a mech, you figure they could essentially just add a character garrison to it and have it to where you could put someone inside of it. And you can literally set like what's the capacity, what's the max seat size, what's the radius of how far they have to get to the object, where are the garrison points on this object, so that way they'll move to that garrison point and then be teleported to whatever point they're going to be put on the vehicle. Do they require a driver or a pilot? Do they have to stop the garrison? So you can see we kind of just like looked at all the systems that we had in the game and just kind of crunched it into the system. Because it seems like there's been a really big push from the community from our standpoint to basically just kind of like tighten up the bolts and make sure we're pushing new content, but at the same time try and alleviate and kind of resolve as many of the bugs that we've kind of had going on for so long. So like that's kind of an effort to basically just kind of clean the system up, and then at the same time set a good foundation going into the future for just kind of like future content, like modders. Just it's easier to work with, it's fun to work with. That's the biggest thing for us. So you figure this is one of the things that we're going to essentially just be, ironing out. So you figure we should be done with it like Monday, Tuesday. And then at that point, we'll spend like another day or two going over the hovercraft, going over the aircraft carrier, see if there's anything else that needs to be like finessed and fixed. Then we're going to look into the evacuation bugs. Because there's been a lot of people reporting the evacuation system bugging out at times. So we've been compiling save files for those. And then we're going to look into a little bit for efficiency. And then there was a bug that was actually located that essentially allows the Leviathan to bypass our game logic. That essentially, it's like, oh, there's a repeater there, but I don't care. And literally, when he fails enough recursion loops, he would just be like, I don't know what to do. Pop up. And and it would allow him to circumvent the repeaters no matter what. So you figure I was able to find that in the last like week or so, so we've earmarked that for a fix as well. And then, so we're gonna fix that, and then we're gonna fix the evacuation bugs. Then we're gonna look at the two things I mentioned before for the aircraft carrier and for the hovercraft. See if there's not any more like shenanigans going on. See if there's no other major docking issues going on. Then we're gonna take all that and we're gonna bundle it into a build for pushing it out to public. We'll give it a couple of days of marination to see, like, does anyone discover anything weird, any performance issues reported? No, great. Then the next order of operations will basically be the whole team will move over to working on a new vehicle AI, where we're basically going to look at, like, Company of Heroes and like, the Chaos implementation and, like, a couple other games we've been playing and figure out, like, okay, like, how do we make a vehicle AI that gets the physics across, but the cars can't flip? And the cars aren't gonna like do like these weird like burnouts that are gonna like basically piss people off. Because you want it realistic. You don't want it like to the point where it's like a detriment to gameplay, where like literally they just overshoot all of their destinations and they act all crazy and a bunch of other stuff like that. So you figure those are all things that we're going to be looking into and basically just kind of crowdsourcing amongst the team going into like next week to essentially just kind of hit that out of the park. Because like you figure before we put the Abrams in, before we put the Bradley in, like we're giving those people a little more time to rig and get the C5 and get all the technical aspects rigged and all that. They have their time, they don't have to rush too much. You figure we'll have the MLRS to show by next Wednesday to Friday. So basically, like, okay, it's modeled, it's game ready, same thing with the Bradley. Conceptually, it's model ready. It just our rigger needs to go in there and like rig the actual little like spinning. I forget. I don't know what they're called. Little like circular metal discs that they have on the Bradley that basically like move the. Help me out there, Ivar. What is it called? How the Bradley has this little like circle metal circle like little discs.
Metal circle disc.
You know, like what the little like the rubber runs off of whatever it is. The track. You have a little the metal hubcaps or whatever. I don't know what they're called.
Rockets?
No, for the love of God, you should know this one of all things. You're like a military buff when it comes. Like you know how you have the track, and then you have a little metal. Yeah, what are those little things called that are in the track?
Rockets.
What are they called?
Rockets.
A sprocket?
Yeah, the wheel, the little wheel track.
Okay, yeah, so the wheels. I didn't think it was as simple as calling it a wheel, but sure. So the wheels for those, you figure, they'll be working that out from a rigging and technical standpoint, which is another reason why they didn't like actually put that in there for the render, because that's like the modeler did his job, he optimized it, did the texturing, and then he passed it off to rigging. And then at that point, it's gonna be the rigging artist's job to sell it and get it like looking like it does in real life. Um, so you figure, yeah, essentially that is the game plan there. Let me see if I can just kind of demonstrate. We've also done some tweaks here. I wonder if this is going to break a little bit, because you figure we're not supposed to be playing, yeah, it broke. We're not supposed to be playing builds right now because the garrison system's broken. So you can see that literally it doesn't know what to do. Yeah, because this is the garrison system component right here. So I figured that was going to happen, so that's kawaii. But you figure that's something else that we're still fixing right now because that was like a miniature garrison system component that we basically had added there. So they just kind of they didn't know how to garrison or attach themselves to points, so they just kind of ran off forever. So you figure that's one of the things that we're still looking into and cleaning up. Let me see what else was on our list of things to cover. Oh right, sorry, I completely breezed over the other stuff. Let me go ahead and let me pull up the other stuff that we have been discussing, modeling, and getting ready for implementation. So you figure, let me just grab these pictures and I will put them up on the live stream so you guys know what the heck I'm talking about. So you figure one of the first things is that you figure we've been modeling and just kind of adjusting the Blackhawk and the Little Bird to be able to support the setup that's needed to basically, get a rocket pod on there, or to get the machine guns on there. So you figure we settled on kind of what GTA 5 does, where they have like that little arm that extends right here, and then we're going to modularly just attach either a rocket pod, two rocket pods, or two of the quad cannons, kind of like we did for the Little Bird, where like if I show the Little Bird right here, you can see that's the current model we have right now. The idea is that, well, I mean, it's in Blender and it's a low poly and yeah. But anyway,
A little Black Hawk.
yeah. Well, you figure, let me open up the other one, which is the front perspective. So you figure, like modeling the actual, like, ammo canister, like the loading feeding system within the back seat. And then, like, I actually earmarked this to kind of bring this out another quarter, because I felt like it was too close to the Little Bird in terms of, like, the distance from the chain gun to the actual thing. So we're going to bring that out a tinsy bit more. But you figure it's one of the things that we're doing is we're adding, like, the missile pods, and we're adding Little Birds, and then that will be part of a push to part of the changes that you're going to see coming down the pipe for the CERC and the doctrine changes is that we're going, like, a lot of the code for the vehicles and the helicopters and the AI are shared a little bit more than I'd like, and that's why you get into some of these like situations where they don't act as you would expect them to almost. Like they're almost unpredictable in terms of like, oh well that made sense for a vehicle to act this way, for a helicopter shared over that functionality, it did an override, but it didn't do it enough and there wasn't enough testing put into it. So you figure if that's going to be another emphasis going into the circuit doctrinal changes, is to basically, we do the ground vehicles, we do the ground AI, we put in the new vehicles, we do the new doctrine stuff. Then the next phase is going to be the helicopters. We separate them into their air branch. We basically we're going to redo the helicopter AI. We're going to redo like how they interact with like what aspects of the code are shared and which aspect is just brand new. Because you figure like a simple change, like what I mentioned for the garrison system, broke it for the LCAC, the guard towers, and the LHA6, which is why we were like, okay, like we need to think a little bit more like optimally in terms of how we're programming and engineering some things and how they're allowed and how much like they're allowed to interact with each other, and just generally like how more aggressively we need to start overriding and just kind of starting to like put a little more emphasis on each subclass and giving it more uh, attention to detail, I guess you could say, would be the key word. So essentially, this is going to be kind of part of that initiative. So like, it's going to be like, okay, we need to like, for the ground vehicles, we'll have a segment where we'll like put out a vehicle on experimental. It'll be the only vehicle that supports it. We'll be like, okay, like go and buy this vehicle. It'll either be the like a stripped down version of the Abrams, or it'll be like a Hummer for simplicity's sake. And we'll be like, hey, we want you guys to build this unit. It's a non-combatant, and just tell us how you feel about it to drive in. Do you think it could be improved? Do you see cases where it screws up or breaks on experimental? No, great, we did our job. Everything's like fleshed out. Okay, let's roll it out to all the other vehicles. And then we would do that. We would do another evaluation, and then at that point we'd be like, okay, like now like we got the new vehicles in, we got the old vehicles converted over to the system. Now let's rip out the helicopters. Let's do the same thing, because we want to get rid of. I think I saw some in the Steam forums the other day, people saying like their helicopters will like still run into stuff at times, and their targeting can be kind of iffy for the Apache. We did improve it quite a bit, but it still seems there's some like edge cases where it screws up. So one thing that I'm going to be asking is that people in the community, if they're open to doing it, which I know there's at least 3 or 4 that have said they would in the past, is that I would roughly say in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to see if anyone is willing to play the game for me and share screen it, either on Discord or on Twitch. And I'm just going to sit there with a notebook, and I'm just going to write down and just see how you play. See what issues, because one of the biggest things that I think that is subconsciously, like, we play our game quite a bit, but we play it in a way where almost sometimes we subconsciously know the shortcomings of the game, so we don't try and do crazy stuff that almost like pushes it to its limit. But like a player has such an untapped mind, like an actual like player that plays the game, where it's just like, oh, well shit, I didn't even think about that combination. Or I didn't think they were gonna move in that way. Like Duravar breaking my shit every other week. So
Break your shit every fucking day.
like you figure it's one of those things where it's like that is a big initiative that I want to do going into the circuit of doctrine stuff. Like we officially transition over, so then that way I can watch people play and be like, oh, okay, that's happening, or this is happening, or like, we thought we had fixed that, but then people weren't talking about it for a while, and then it kind of came back with a vengeance, like Batman. So you figure it's one of those things where we need to just kind of like hit upon that, and I think it's going to be really important to do that because my biggest thing going into 2024 and just like going into the summer because we're gonna get there pretty darn soon and beyond is getting the game to a point where it's bugless, it's feature complete, and then that way we could go and we could spend a couple of months doing the co-op, doing the replication. We could start like a special channel where we just literally just drip feed like we just did this, check this out. Kind of like what the Skyrim Together team did, where like even if they just got like a simple thing replicated, they'd post it just so people knew like we're working on stuff. Like it's gonna be because you think about it, every mechanic and every system has to be hand critiqued and audited to determine do we send this to all the clients? Do we send it to one client? When do we send it? Do we not send it when the player is like 1,000 feet away, and then we just form like a pool, and then we just send it when the player enters that area of hemisphere, the hemisphere, and then we synchronize it up or whatever. So there's gonna be a lot of R&D and things that we're gonna have to figure out on the fly when we get to that point. So you figure like that those are my kind of like my goals going into the summer, going into the new year, is to basically like well, not year, sorry, the end of the year, is to basically like get the circuit of doctrine stuff, get the co-op going, and then from there, obviously work on the operator and the other stuff. And then one thing I would say is that you figure, I'm having a brain fart right now. There was something else I needed to hit upon in the announcements. Let me see if I can find it. Um, oh right, Oh, right now I remember. Sorry. Is that the other thing was that you figure we've had a much bigger, we've changed our pipeline quite a bit. And I mentioned this in the, like a month ago. And I'm pretty sure people have noticed it. Is that we've been pumping out vehicles a lot quicker. You figure. Or instead of like modeling the base vehicle, we'll go and we'll buy someone that basically models like the vehicle to 80-90% completion. It's like a 2 million poly, 4 million poly asset. They literally just did it off of a military spec diagram. So we do that, and then we basically just spend a week cleaning it up, adding CERC logo, optimizing it, doing textures, and that has seen so much,
Crying
like,
in the corner.
crying in the corner, I guess, because Michael's been crying in the corner. Because some of those assets, people will just literally just, like, apply Turbo Smooth, and it's, like, just a flat surface, and you're just like, why did you apply Turbo Smooth, bro? It's quads, and it wasn't going to deform or change the model in any shape, manner, or form. What the frack? So, it's always interesting when you see some of these assets, but you figure they've been like a lifesaver, in terms of basically our pipeline and speeding things up and expediting it. Some of them on the Unreal Marketplace, some of them on like CG Art or whatever. So, we took that approach, and then that way we build on it, we customize it, and then by the time you see the final model, it's nowhere even close to like the poly count, the visuals, the aesthetic that even the original artist made. So then that way it's almost like a quick start file. And you figure that's worked out great for us going ahead. I mean, like regardless, when we get to the part of concepting more like unique designs, like a given example, like the Mind Thrower Atlas and the DNA farming Atlas are going to be custom, so we're just going to have to just design our own custom stuff for that, which is not the end of the world. That's fine. We have concept artists for that. We have modelers for that. But you figure when it's already been like true proven like devices that have been on the war field for like 20 years. Apache only looks like an Apache. You know what I mean? Like a Chinook only looks like a Chinook in one way. Sure, there's different modifications, but the modelers can take that base variation and then do whatever they want with it and make like each different, make all the different configurations and all the different stuff. So you figured that was something that we changed and that sped us up because otherwise we'd still probably be modeling. We'd probably still be like halfway through the Bradley at that point. And we already have like the C5, and then we're gonna have the MRS, and then we'll have the VTOL to show soon. So we'll have the VTOL. It'll have a weapons package as well, like the Little Bird and the Black Hawk. It'll be our first hybrid jet unit. So basically, like that'll come in when we do the air stuff and revamping the air like AI because then that will be like an emphasis on like, okay, can we do jets? Like the aircraft carrier was our test of like how well can we do aircraft, like on the water. What are going to be the growing pains long term? What are the performance implications? It was a fun technical test. It taught us a lot of things about the engine. It taught us how to do movement off of the navigation mesh and how to do transitions. And we even had to like go and look at like old developer studies from like Sea of Thieves where it was like we had to like look at like old like 2 hour, 4 hour GDC talks of basically like how they were able to fake their navigation mesh. Where like, cause like the engine doesn't support dynamic navigation with a world as large as ours is, so we had to like statically build the navigation mesh in a sun hemisphere under the world, and then basically like do advanced math translation to basically move the unit and translate it in local space to basically like that like predefined aspect of the world. So like you figure stuff like that has allowed us to kind of figure out like, oh, when we do battlements for tier 3 walls, we know how to do that now. We know how to do transferring of units. So like if anyone's ever seen Resident Evil Apocalypse, I think it's called. Yeah, the second movie. Basically like when they have like the umbrella soldiers on the actual like walls and they're looking down, that was a big design goal that we wanted to do forever. And we tried it with the pillbox, and we tried it with like the battlements, and we could never get it to work because the navigation and the engine can be very, very wonky once you start to go really large in scale. Then we found a lot of ways with the carrier that opened a lot of doors for us in terms of like, oh, it like opened an almost another way of thinking in terms of like having unit movement, that's faked almost, but you can't tell. So you figure, so it's because it was one of the systems that I theorized for like one of the last polished systems that we'll put for like the aircraft carrier's deck, like a little like elevator, is your units aren't gonna teleport, they're gonna walk. Like they'll have like a preset point, and they'll like occupy a space of the elevator, kind of like they occupy like a certain amount of like dynamic space, and then they'll go onto that point, so then that way they fill a slot, and then that way when the elevator goes up and down, it'll dynamically lerp them on and off the elevators and fake their movement, and then release control back to you. So then that way, like, the consistency is kind of there. Because one thing I want to do long term is I want to make it to where the Chinooks and the Atlases and like all the transport units actually have Congo lines that get on and off, and not make it as gamey, where like you can just tell everyone to like go to a transport truck and they don't have to like go to the back of the truck and they don't get in. It's something that I want to do, but it's like more of like, okay, like at the end of the road, before we release out of early access, we have the uptake of money from co-op, so I can invest in like going and like renting like these vehicles are going to like a surplus military place with Michael, putting on a mocap suit and literally just climbing out of old broken transport trucks for a day. Because I mean, and there's so many like decommissioned like military vehicles all over the country where you can just go and you can just do all this mocap stuff. And then that way we could just literally have it to where like, oh, when the Little Bird people get off, they actually get off. Or like when the people get out of like the Chinook, they exit, single file. Because that's one of the biggest things I want to do for immersion long term. Plus on top of that, integration with the operator. So then that way like the operator can physically walk onto the Chinook when you're playing in third person. But it's like one of those like long-term like design goals to slowly but surely just kind of add more attention to detail to every nuance of gameplay. Like so like you figure, yeah, like that would kind of be like a drive-by, I guess you can say. I'm trying to see, is there anything else? I mean, Derivar, is there anything else that you've kind of noticed that you think we should kind of bring up, or anything you want to draw attention to?
None that I can think of at the moment, honestly, but I have noticed quite a few questions being asked. Pretty good ones, too.
We got 20 minutes, let's do it.
Yeah. So Wolf Holgan asks, since you guys are adding strategic resources, that radio tower by the airfield, will that be capturable as well?
Oh, he must have came in late, yeah. That's literally the radio tower that you capture. Well, not, I mean, not sorry, not the I mean, sorry, not the radio tower. It's the bloody. Here, let me show you on the share screen, just to make sure there's no. It's the air traffic controller right here. So this asset will get a little bit of facelift because it looks kind of ugly and boxy, but it serves its purpose. So like you figure like my artist, one of my artists, Dimitri, has been kind of using this as an excuse to kind of like clean house on old assets that were just made very quickly back in the day. That they're a little bit boxier than we'd like in our early access release. So like you're gonna notice like some of the assets in this hospital area will get cleaned up a little bit, quite a bit. You know, because like the biggest thing is we kind of want to slowly but surely just kind of like audit the project and get it ready for like, oh look, this is not an early access title. It doesn't look like it was made in PS2 era. So like you figure that's one of the biggest things. It's just like this looks like Half-Life 2, like literally. So you figure it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, like that. This is the thing, and essentially, like you're gonna see the artist using this as an excuse to just modernize some of the graphics and just like up the poly count in some cases, because like you figure there's gonna be probably about a dozen buildings that just get Thanos like just like snapped and get replaced with like modern new designs, like a brand new police station, police headquarters. Like there's gonna be like 2 to 3 police headquarters, one HQ based off of the book location in Pierce's book, and then there's going to be a couple gun stores, and then the clinics and the hospitals are already in. I earmarked adding a couple in because there was a miscommunication about like the hospital over there in Treasure Island. Is that we like because we were like, are we gonna ever make that back to Chelsea's like starting location that she always starts from? And we were like, nah, let's just keep it dynamic and random. But by the time you show up, she's anywhere. She could be anywhere in the city because then it makes it too predictable to know like, oh, I'll just go there and box her in. Am I right? You know, and until we can get to the point of solidifying her AI. Because you figure, like, that's another thing that I've, like, you know, it's like making her to where she's more fleshed out, which is coming down the pipe on the infected AI changes and all that. Um, anyway, back to your questions.
So Terminal's got two questions for us.
Hitters with the terminal.
The common strategic resources going to change appearance based on who owns them. Neutral CERC survivors, standard yellow tarps and one standard, two yellow tarps and biohazard decorations.
It showed the flag.
Metal makeshift barricades.
It showed the flag of whoever owns it. It's gonna so like when you guys play the game, you have the dynamic civilian groups. The same flags that show up there the same way, or like Pierce and Natalie would show up. So the idea is like if another group takes dominance over that area and they're just using it passively to like generate supply or whatever, then they're just going. It's gonna streamline and because like we have a stronghold system for civilian groups, and I feel like it could use some tinkering and some maneuvering because I don't think that many people notice that we even had that level of sophistication for dynamic civilian groups, where they will get to a point in their development where they can build longer, like large, like super bases in every province. And like the idea is that by being tied to these, they'll be able to convert that to supply, and then use that to essentially streamline their development to building larger colonies that essentially would give them a better chance of holding out against the infected. Unless like, you know, Leviathan comes or birds or juggernauts and that's gonna like probably wreck their faces. But you figure yeah, that's the general idea there. Um yeah. And then you figure for scrap metal and for makeshift barricades, we're not planning on that level of like resources in the world. For them, we're doing it more like the Division. Like Division 2, where they just go to a random area and there's preset markers that level designers put, and they'll just play miscellaneous animations, and they'll just look like they're just searching for things. But for the most part, that's the deepest we're gonna go at this time. Because any more than that is gonna detract from just all the other stuff that we have to do in terms of like the overall bug fixing and everything else. But it's not a bad idea. It's just for right now, like I think it's okay just keeping it the generic scrap resource, and they just convert that to whatever they need to keep it simple and straightforward for just how they work. Back to you, Darla.
Alright, the second part of the question is, will damage mitigation types of wounds be expanded upon so units' health matters more? I find that 99.9%, 99.99%. Oftentimes, a unit isn't at full health, it's dead instantly. Absolutely worst case scenario, you put a single medic in your group and throw away any soldiers that get infected, 99% of which die instantly anyway before you can do anything with them. You don't have to worry about that healing at all. I feel that the hospitals being open for takeover could be cool, but you really don't need them for you. If your units are damaged but not dead or infected, a lot of zeros and a one.
That's a Michael question. He's the one in charge of balance. I'm gonna have to. Michael's not here right now, but you figure he's planning to rebalance. He's been kind of like he did one. He did one 2 weeks ago, where he rebalanced all the weapon damage tables and just based off of what people were, giving feedback about, and made it to where units were more survivable in melee hits. We're going to be making the infection more deadly when we do the DNA research tree after we wrap up the circuit doctrine stuff. So you figure there's going to be the thing you're going to want medical supplies. And we'll very likely use this as an excuse to put ambulances around with, excuse me, with healing items in the back of them that also have finite resources. But I'm trying to think here. I have to bring it up with Michael because you figure my understanding was it's at least for I guess I'll have to watch to see how you guys are playing. Because you figure when I play, my units seem like they are fucking gods. But let me.
When I play, it's more like Emperor Mint. Everyone's expendable.
Oh, you don't even care about healing them.
No.
That's fucked up.
You die, you get replaced.
Okay, well, like you figure, what I would say is, Terminal, why don't you. Can you show me that? When I do a ping, basically, if it's still a problem in about 2 weeks, can you show me that on a share screen after we wrap up all the bugs and the other stuff? It's like, let me know if it's still like garbage. Because if it's garbage, then we'll fix it. I need to see the particulars, and then, because like again, I want to just sit there and write notes and watch people play. So you figure we got 8 minutes. So good. So what else have we got?
Alright, check us. Only the base models ready for, or the package.
Base
for the
models?
MRS and the Bradley 2.
Where is that? What's the question?
Just on the terminals.
Oh, the base. Okay, okay, yeah, it's only the base models right now. It's gonna be the base model. Some of them they have like defensive. They have armor modifiers you can change, and then they have camo modifiers you can change, and then there's something else I'm breathing. And then they have. What was the other thing? Yeah, it was defensive and camo. Because right now we just left it the generic, the Bushmaster, the Toe. Like we kept it like the basic ones. I think the Abrams allows you to switch out 2 different weapons for the machine gun. We kept the smoothbore as the primary. And you figure there's no variation for the main cannon for the Abrams. Like it's just literally a smoothbore of cannon and that's it. Because like right now already they're like these are super weapons. Like literally, they wreck face. Like I think I showed it a couple weeks ago where I had like the Abrams fighting off against the Leviathan. That Leviathan just got shredded. And then it was brought to my attention that the Abrams wasn't even working at like 60% efficiency. Because you figure like the couple of the weapons, one of my technical artists went and watched the AMA a couple days later and he was like, yeah, you realize that like some of the guns weren't even working sometimes, right? And I was like, no, I didn't even notice that because I have like a monitor that's like at a weird angle that like I use for like the Twitch stuff and the YouTube stuff, and I can't like see the super good detail when it's at that angle for like the monitor. I call it the monitor stream monitor or whatever. So like you figure like that still has to be corrected and edited. So the Abrams and the Bradley, MRS, the Apache, they're all gonna be very powerful in their own right. So you figure we're just going to keep them with the stock rep Rudy with a couple of different armor add-ons and the camo, and there's a couple of extra weapons for the Abrams, and then we're just going to roll it out in that fashion, and then see how they're received, and kind of go from there. Um, but yeah, all right. What else have we got, Derivar?
Well, we got 2 YouTube questions here.
Okay.
Born asks, slow zombies when me want to make World War Z, when me want to make World War Z and Treasure Island, please.
Oh. Okay, so that question, so people do still want that. Because you figure that was kind of pushed on the back burner while we were just kind of working on like all the other crazy stuff. That comes down to a custom game settings revamp. We added in some, and there's still a lot more we could do. Because like the custom game settings are basically mini modding, is how we see it. Where it's like, you don't like our settings? Be our guest. Go in there and tweak it. So you figure, and I've even heard some reports that some of the custom game settings can reset or like act kind of funky at times. So I put that on our list of things to kind of audit. I'm probably gonna be the one that just does that, just to basically not pull away from the other artists. So I've been building a list, basically just going over all the reviews, all the Steam comments, all the discussion threads, all Discord, and I'm just building a huge Trello board, and then I'm assigning them out based off of when we have time between all the major line items of like, okay, like the whole point is like 30 to 40%. Some days it's like 40% bug fixing, 60% just kind of like keep, like essentially like getting the new features and the mechanics in, so we're at least kind of getting the roadmap. There's some kind of active movement going on. Some days we kind of adjust it based off of like priorities of like, oh, there's a lot of bugs, we need to like just go all in on bugs tonight. So you figure that's one of the things that it's not a bug necessarily, but it's still like a major grievance that we've seen. So it's on our list of things to do. Where it's like, either Derek can't find the time to do it, I'm going to do it in the next couple of weeks and basically figure out something about like adding a couple more game settings, because there was a community poll that's still in the announcements channel. I need to go through and like see what else I can add. And then I definitely want to add the walker mode. I want to add like turning off the special infected, like the spitters, the blow up guys. So people that just want like the more like standard zombie infection thing. Chelsea is a no, is a hard no at this point because she's just too instrumental to the whole gameplay loop. Like if we took her out, it would take weeks to get it playable because everything is built around her. Her and the lieutenants. Probably like a week or two, actually. But still, it's like one of those things where it's like, we're not going to touch that right now because that would push us even further back from what we already are behind on the roadmap stuff. So you figure, yeah, there's that. What else we got, Derivar? 3 minutes.
Alright, so JP on YouTube asks, will we ever get the option to remove civilian factions, special infected, like more custom settings for these things?
Remove civilian factions. Let me double check something.
I'm not sure what you mean by civilian factions.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. What do you mean by that? Could you elaborate a little bit?
I don't know if they're still there on the YouTube.
Let me check something. I'm actually opening up the game to check the custom game settings for something because my understanding. Oh, I get what he means. We forced the civilians before. We used to allow people to turn them on and off if they didn't want to play with them. The dynamic civilian groups. So he's basically want to just turn off the dynamic civilian groups altogether. Is my understanding, right?
I would assume so.
Let me think about that for a second.
Because they're not exactly replying.
It's fine. I can deduce what he's getting at. We'll do that next week. I can have Derek squeeze that in, because that I don't know why that was removed. I don't even remember approving that. So you figure, let me add that in to a card. Add dynamic civilian groups disable option. Got it. Alright, so we'll see what we can do about squeezing that into experimental next week when we start up. 1 minute, Derivar. Get a good one.
Um, ooh, here we go. Joker asks, can we get a factory laboratory building where we build and research vaccines or specialized anti-Pangu weapons or bionic limbs for the troops, because it feels a bit off that medics can heal anyone with no effort would be a great mission for strategic.
Yeah, yeah, that's okay. So let's get into this can of worms. This is going to be a quick one. So essentially, that was the original idea, and that was supposed to be what the medical center was for. So essentially, what we want to do is essentially the medical center is going to be like, and even the medics are going to be more of like a temporary thing for like when they get infected. They'll have to go back to triage and kind of you'll have to like basically min max and kind of treat your units when they get infected. Because the biggest thing that's going to happen is that you're going to have to deal with the viral infection of like the gas towers and like literally like being like if you run out of like the oxygen while you're in those zones, your units are going to get immediately infected. So you're going to rush them back to triage or have a medic temporarily lower their infection level. But the idea is that we want to have the medical facility kind of be like, okay, like that's your research, that's your triage. That's how you're gonna maintain the viral outbreak in terms of like the DNA research, but also the aspect of just combating like when your units go out. Oh, you're gonna have to, disband these units because they're so infected that every time you don't have a cure, because you have to research that. Every time they are exposed, it increases the volatility of the virus so that it gets more deadly. So as the virus progresses in them, it will basically overtake them quicker. So you can counteract that by taking them by a medic, by taking them by the medical facilities, or you can take them out back and shoot them. Up to you. But that's the basic idea, is that essentially it gets to that point for some of your units where you're like, well, I can rush ahead and try and get this research for the cure, so then that way I don't have to worry about this aspect of gameplay. But like then I'm gonna hurt in other areas of research, kind of
Nothing
deal.
like
Because it's
taking
gonna.
them behind the woodshed.
What do you say?
Nothing like taking them behind the woodshed.
Sure. So you figure that that's the general idea that we're going into, is that the medical facility is kind of like it's just like a very generic heals all your problems kind of deal. There's no real kind of management. There's no real kind of interaction with your units. And the same thing with the medics. The medics are going to be more so like if you have a bullet wound or if you have a scratch, you're fine. They'll heal you up. You're good to go. But if it's anything like the Pangu virus related, then all they can do is slow it down. And just kind of like keep you alive and to the point where like it overcomes even their ability to do it. Because like there's like 5 levels of severity of infection that we have programmed in the game, where like 0 is you're not infected, and then 1 is like you've been infected, and 5 is like if you walk away from a medic or you walk away from like a medical facility for longer than 40 seconds, you turn and you die. So you figure like those were the old approaches that we were doing it, and we turned that down until we could basically like give more like hints and cues and basically like focus more on the DNA research aspect of the gameplay, because we want to be able to give people ways of like researching into like, oh, when your unit gets infected, there's a less chance of it being like actually like containing like contracting the virus. When the spitter spits at you, there's a less chance that that will infect you. What else was there? Like there was like a couple, like there was like about a dozen different things that were on the DNA research tree, where they're like different characteristics of gameplay, where like it would make your units more resilient, and you would spend your DNA at the medical facility to basically like do said research. They can't be immune, but we had like one where like they wouldn't burn as long. So they had like better armor plates or I forget the exact technical name we gave it, but like we had ones where like spitter acid duration reduced by like zero point 0.5 seconds for every level that you get. So like you figure like spitter acid burns them for like 3 to 4.5 seconds, somewhere around there. So you figure you could cut that down by almost by half by doing 3 levels, and it would improve the resistance of your units in mid to late game if you got that DNA research, because then you'd be like, oh, like my units can actually take a hit from a spitter acid and not like get melted, basically. So those are all things that we were just kind of like earmarking for that section of the game. Um, okay, so I think that's pretty much it. There are for questions. Remember, we're going to be doing this again in like 2 weeks. The next time is in the event calendar for Discord. You want to give the closing, Derivar?
Yes, I shall begin the closing. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming along, and thank you for Robert for being here and not sleeping in.
Uh,
Uh,
I was sick.
You what? You weren't
What?
sick last time. You weren't sick last time. You were just you just.
Those are fighting words. Those are fighting words.
Those are fighting words.
Anyway, continue.
Anyway, if you would like to support Cepheus further, please do go over to the Patreon. We also have Discord pledges and a supporter pack on Steam and a merch store. I keep forgetting about that one. So yeah, so we'll catch you guys next time.
Indeed. Thank you guys all for coming. And again, about 2 weeks roughly, I'm going to be putting out a ping on announcements, so keep an eye out, because I want to watch people play the game and hear like what kind of issues they're running into and talk to them firsthand. Because like again, like there's a lot of stuff that just I feel like doesn't go reported, and then like people assume we know, but we don't know. Like we don't, like yeah.